right, folks. Well, this time around we want to talk about permission systems in Linux. So we want to talk about how permissions are controlled and how you can monitor them for files and directories in a Linux file system. So essentially there's three different types of permission that you can allocate: read, write, and execute. And there's three different categories of users that you can set permissions for: user, group, and other. And so we'll talk about the three types of permission and three types of group in a few minutes. Essentially what you can do, so there's 9 combinations here, right? Read, write, execute for user, read, write, execute for group, read, write, execute for other. And for each of them, you can either grant or deny a specific permission. So in general, I'm going to recommend that you go through and deny permission for anybody that doesn't explicitly need it. Right? You don't want to go through and give everybody write access to one of your directories, because then people can go through and modify the contents of it, right? They can add stuff from it or add stuff to it. They can delete stuff from it. If you have things you don't want people to be able to copy, then you don't want to set read permission for it. So we will talk about permissions as we go through this, but it's generally safest to start off with everything locked and only unlock things as needed for the people who specifically need it. So that's what I want to talk about today, is how to go through and do all this. Let's see. So we've got the 3 different categories of user. User means essentially the owner, you, the person who created the file, the person who's setting the permissions for the file. Group means anybody that the Linux administrator has put in a group with the user. There can be multiple groups associated with a specific user. You know, you might have a project group, you might be in the student group. There are all sorts of possibilities. And then other essentially means everybody. So if you turn on permissions for user, you're turning it on for yourself. If you turn it on for group, you're turning it on for anybody who is in a group with you. And if you turn it on for other, you're turning it on for the whole world. So I just want to take a quick look at the group for a moment. So one of the things that you can do here, we'll come back to that in a second. One of the things that you can do is to see what groups you're actually part of. So if you type in groups, it'll give you your username and what groups you're in. So I think by default, all students are put in the student group, and by default, that's the only group that you're put in. It's possible to go through and talk to our wizard Merlin and create other groups for projects if that's required. Usually you'll have to get permission from the instructor and that kind of thing, but by default the only group that you're part of is students. So if you turn group permission on, you're probably unlocking permission for whatever that specific aspect is for all of the students in Comp Sci. So just as a heads up there. And then you've got these 3 categories of permission: read, write, and execute. So with files, it seems pretty obvious. Read permission means somebody can look at the content of the file, they can read the file, they can copy the file. Write permission means that they can modify the file. And execute means that they can execute the file. That's really only meaningful if the file is actually executed, is an executable file. So if it's a script or a program. But you've got the 3 different permissions for files. For directories, read basically means that somebody can look at the contents of the directory. Write means that they can add things to the directory or remove things from the directory, or rename things in the directory. And then execute is what gives them the permission to cd into or through that directory. So you've got the 3 categories of permission and the 3 different groups of people that you can apply them to. Now, if you want to see the permissions associated with something, this is where the ls-l command comes in. So ls-l, and then you give it a file name or a directory name, and it will show you the 9 permissions associated with that file or that directory. And it's going to come out looking something like this idea, where there'll be either a dash or a D telling you if it's a file or an executable. So a dash means file, D means directory. That. Then it gives you the permissions for user. So it'll give you 3 things. R, W, and X means read's turned on for the user, write's turned on, execute is on. If there's a dash in place of any of these, it means that particular permission is turned off. So read, write, execute, are they on or off for the user? And then the next 3 characters are again read, write, execute for group. So this particular example is saying read is on for the group, write is off for the group, execute is on for the group. And then the final 3 characters are for other. So in this particular case, R is turned on for other for everybody, write is turned off, execute is turned off. So when somebody tries to access a file, it looks at if they're in the same group as you, or if they are you, or if they're everybody else, and it uses whichever is, I guess, the most powerful permission for them. So if they're in your group, then they can use the group permission, or they can use the other permission, whichever works out better for them. So you've got these this sort of 10-character set, 9 characters for the permissions, and then the 1 to tell you if it's a file or a directory. So if we give that a try for just a second here. So if we just do an ls, we've got these, half dozen files and an executable. So if we do an ls-l for, let's say, the myprogx, and just see what we've got set as permissions there. So in this one, so ls-l gives the long listing. It tells you who owns it, who created it, how big it is, when it was modified, that sort of thing. But that first set of 10 characters is saying, okay, it's a file, not a directory. Read, write, and execute are all turned on for me. Read and execute are turned on for my group, and read and execute are turned on for everybody, for other. So you get these 3 permissions. If we do the same thing with, let's say, one of the data files, oops, ls-l data1, you'll see that they're not executable, but everything else is probably the same. Right? We've got read and write for the user, and then read set for group and other. So you've got these 9 different permissions you can take a look at. We should create a directory here just so we can see what that one looks like. Make directory migrate directory. So if we do an ls-l on migrate directory, oops. What have I done here? Oh, let's put some content in there. Let's copy data1 into my great directory and try that. It's showing me, what is the option for showing the permissions just for the directory? Let's do dot. That'll show us. Can't remember my options here. So this time around, so I'm just showing all the permissions for everything here. If we look down here for my great directory, we can see it's a directory, so it's got the D. Excuse me. Read, write, and execute is set, so I can look in it, I can modify it, I can cd into it, and then read and execute are set for group and other. So we've got these different combinations of permissions set for the different files that are out there and the different directories that are out there. All right. So what if we want to change them? So chmod is the change or modify the permissions command. So it's chmod, who we want to change permissions for, whether we want to grant or deny permission, and which specific settings we're interested in, and then the file. So chmod, and then who we want to change it for. Your options are U for user, G for group, O for other. So any combination of those three characters. So in this case, UGO is saying for user, group, and other, a plus or a minus to indicate whether we want to grant or deny permission. And then any combination of R, W, and X for read, write, and execute. So you can turn on or turn off permission for any combination of the three groups and any combination of the three permission types for a specific file. Right? Plus to add, minus to deny. So if we go back to our example here, and let's clear up some of this stuff. So if we've got this data1 file, and I suddenly decide that I want to turn on execute permission, it's not a script or a program or anything, but I can still go ahead and turn on execute permission for it. So let's say I want to add execute permission for group. So it's group plus execute and data1. And if we do our ls-l again, we can see that we have now turned on execute. Or if I decide that I want to turn off read permission, so for other, I want to turn off read permission for data1, and then show the permissions again. You can see that read has been turned off. If I want to turn on execute for everybody, user, group, and other, I want to add execute. And now we see that everybody's got execute status. So again, you can go through and change these different combinations of permissions. All right. Again, stay safe. Don't unlock something unless there's actually a really solid reason for it. There is one other version of chmod that you'll run across, and that's where instead of using this sort of user group other plus or minus read, write, execute, you give a numeric value. And essentially what they're doing is taking 3 octal values to represent the 3 sets of permissions. So that first digit, the 6, is indicating which permissions I want to set for user. The second digit is saying, or octal digit at least, is specifying what permissions I want to set or deny for group. And the last one is for other. And the way it's done is treating it as kind of the binary representation of that number. So for 6 is 110 in binary. So it's saying the 1 represents turn on. So 110 means turn on for user, turn on for group, and turn off for other. Or this 4, right? 4 in binary is 100. So it's saying turn on for user, turn off for group, turn off for other. 0 is saying turn off for everybody. Right? So a 7 is turn everything on for that particular category. A 0 is turn everything off for that particular user category. And you can look at the different bit patterns. So these are things that you will run across. If you see a numeric chmod command, this is the way it's being used. All right. I prefer using the user group other plus or minus read, write, execute, just because I'm less likely to mix up my bits when I'm doing that. But whatever works for you, right? As long as you know what you're doing, it either way will work quite adequately. All right, that's where we will leave the permission information for now. Have fun with it.